Hey there, it's Gabrielle Nicolay from Complicated Kids, and we are going to dive into developmental milestones and why they matter and why they might not matter, and sort of what you need to know about these things called developmental milestones. So, what are developmental milestones? Let's just start there. And basically, what they are benchmarks about what we know about typical child development. You can already see where this is going to get problematic for complicated orchid kids, right? Because orchid kids, complicated kids, are not following, by definition, they're not following the traditional developmental milestones. We're going to put that aside for just a second, though, and talk about why do we use developmental milestones? How are they helpful? And then we'll tweak how they're not. So basically, developmental milestones tell us something about the order and the progression of what we expect to see from babyhood all the way up to adulthood. They are measures of growth, of development, of independence, and of stages where kids are evolving and changing and growing. And so, for example, and there are obviously lots of developmental milestones happening the earlier in development you get, right? So when I think about from a speech and language perspective, for example, when we're talking about speech and language developmental milestones, for the first year, every couple of months, we're looking at a new developmental milestone. And you can go, there's a pretty good developmental milestones information on the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, on their website. If you type, go into Google, type CDC developmental milestones, you will get a milestone tracker. And so if that's interesting to you and you think it would be helpful, you can check that out. There are also some really good milestone trackers on understood.org. And understood.org is an organization that I love. And so you'll hear me refer to understood.org frequently on this podcast and like in the world, because they're doing amazing stuff. Okay, so in the first year, there's like every couple of months, every 6 weeks, we're doing something, right? Baby's born, baby is kind of vegetative. And at about 6 weeks, right about the time that we're ready to throw them out the window, they smile socially for the first time, right? 6 weeks is like not a very long amount of time to like get to a developmental milestone, which is a social smile. Amazing. From a speech and language perspective, you know, until about 3 months, we're looking at kind of really just vegetative, automatic signs, burping, squealing, you know, crying, whatever. After about 4 months, we're listening for very purposeful raspberries. And that's what happens between about 4 and 6 months. At 6 months, then we're looking at something else. At 9 months, we're looking at something else, right? So these are constantly changing. After about a year, those milestones tend to lengthen out a little bit. And, you know, we go sort of year by year, 6 month by 6 month. And then by the time you get to like teenagerhood, you know, tweens and teens, those are really lengthening out. But we are still looking at milestones, right? We're looking at, for example, in a teenager, the ability to like navigate time away from home, right? The ability to organize their own homework, which for many complicated kids is a challenge, right? So we already know, again, when we're just kind of putting it aside for now, many of the kids that we're talking about in this podcast are not following these developmental milestones, but they exist. Okay, so why am I spending all this time talking about developmental milestones? I find them helpful in this way. When we want to do a 30,000 feet, a bird's eye view assessment or kind of look-see, you know, like poke your head up and like look around and like scan the territory from a zoomed out approach. And we only want to do that every so often, like probably max twice a year. Okay. Maybe more frequently for younger kids, maybe that frequently for older kids. So we want to zoom out and just see, how is this orchid child comparing to what we expect to see on the developmental milestones? That's all. We do it for a moment, right? We zoom out for a moment to see kind of where we are and where we're going. And then we come right back down to reality. And so this is where milestones maybe aren't so helpful, because if we try to tether what we're seeing on a daily basis to some milestone list, we're going to be making ourselves crazy. And we're not going to do the work, and we're not going to help our orchid do the work that they need to be doing, because we're constantly up here at 30,000 feet looking at like, oh my God, we have to get to California and we're only in Pennsylvania, right? That's kind of how I'm thinking about it. And so if developmental milestones are the map of how to get to California, that's all fine and good. We need to know that we're going to California. But when we're in Pennsylvania, we need to know how to get to Ohio, right? Or we need to know how to get to the next town over and how we're getting there. And so that's when we really want to come down and be on the ground. We do not want to be at 30,000 feet. And we want to be focusing on, where is kiddo now? And what is the next thing that we can put into place that will help them? Okay. That's how we do use developmental milestones. And so we just never want to be in the position of like using them against ourselves and against our kids. That's like, we just don't want to do that. And we also might not want to be beholden to developmental milestones when we know we're dealing with somebody who is neurodivergent. Because by definition, actually, even if they are making progress, they're not going to be following developmental norms. And so it's a little bit like, know the rules so that you can break the rules, right? That's another way, another different way of thinking about developmental milestones. Know what they are so that you can know whether or not you're going to apply them to the kiddo that you're working with. Be it, whether you're a parent, whether you're a therapist. So we just have to know about them, and then we can decide to either chuck them out the window because the child that we have in front of us is not on that trajectory. They're not going to California, and that's fine. There are many, many other beautiful states to go to. And maybe we need to, make a different map, right? So those are kind of the ways that I think about developmental milestones. And I think of developmental milestones as kind of one pillar of child development that we should be aware of. Again, maybe to be aware of so that we know that we're throwing it away, or that we're aware of so that we can kind of chart a course and know where we're ending up. If this podcast was helpful for you, I would love for you to forward it to somebody who might need to know this. Maybe somebody who had a baby recently, or who is struggling with understanding why or how developmental milestones apply or don't to their child. And I will see you next time. Take care.